When I was about 12, I spent New Year's Eve at my friend's house, while our parents went to a restaurant in a nearby town. The house was really old and far away from other houses, which made it feel super creepy. To get there, you had to drive up a long, overgrown path surrounded by tall trees that almost blocked out the sky. Some of my friends at school said the house was haunted, and I even remember hearing that the house was mentioned in a ghost book, which made it even scarier. So anyways, we were sitting downstairs in the living room, watching TV when we heard a really loud crashing sound. I can still remember the look in my friend's eyes when we turned to each other, completely shocked. It took us a while to get up the courage to go and see what made the noise. We slowly left the living room and walked down the hallway, trying to stay quiet. The sound seemed to come from upstairs, so we decided to go up and check it out. When we got to the top of the stairs, we felt a freezing cold breeze coming from somewhere. It wasn't just chilly, it felt like ice against our skin. We slowly walked down the hallway following the cold air. Then we turned into another hallway. This house wasn't just big, it was enormous, almost like a mansion from the 1920s. With high ceilings and long dark corridors, it felt like the house was watching us. At the end of the hallway, we saw his mom and dad's bedroom door. It was slightly open and moving back and forth, creaking softly as it swung. We both stopped and stood still, completely frozen. Neither of us said a word. After a moment, my friend started walking toward the door. I was too scared to move and stayed behind a little. He pushed the door open and stepped into the room. It was so dark inside that it swallowed him up. I could barely see his shadow anymore. For a few seconds, everything was completely silent. Then out of nowhere, he let out the most terrifying scream I've ever heard. My heart started racing, and without thinking, I ran toward the room to see what was wrong. I felt around for the light switch and quickly turned it on. He was standing completely still, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear, staring at an empty corner of the room. Just to the side of him was a massive antique mirror, shattered into pieces. The broken glass was spread all over the floor. I slowly stepped closer, carefully avoiding the broken glass, and put my hand on his shoulder. His skin felt cold, like he'd been standing in the freezing breeze we felt earlier. "Are you okay?" Without looking at me, he whispered. She broke the mirror. His voice was shaky, almost like he didn't believe his own words. Confused, I asked, "Who broke it?" Finally, he turned his head slightly toward me and said, "The woman in the corner." At that moment, I brushed it off and told him we should leave. He agreed and started to walk out with me, but just before we left, I couldn't help myself. I wanted to check the mirror. I thought maybe the wire holding it had broken or something. So I bent down and carefully turned the mirror over. And to my surprise, the string that held it to the wall was still perfectly fine. It hadn't snapped. I looked at the wall, and the nail was still firmly in place, exactly where it should be. That's when fear really hit me. I was so scared, I told him to call his parents and ask them to come home right away. We waited outside by the front door until our parents got back from the restaurant. When they arrived, my dad and his dad went straight upstairs to check the bedroom. They saw the broken mirror but didn't take us seriously. They said we were probably messing around and playing a game that got out of hand. The scariest part is this. I'm 24 now, and recently, I was chatting with my mom about random things. Since New Year's is coming up, that night from years ago came up in the conversation. I decided to tell her the full story about what happened. After I finished, she looked at me and said, "I believe you. Your friend's mom told me something a few days after that night. She said she saw a woman in her bedroom, standing there, and the woman told her to leave the house." Hearing that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It gave me chills all over again, even after all these years. And I started having flashbacks to that night, even though it's been almost 12 years now. To this day, I still can't figure out how that mirror fell off the wall. For it to fall, someone would have had to lift it up and over the hook. It couldn't just fall on its own. For the woman my friend seemed to be staring at in the corner of the room, I think it's better if I just try to forget about it. I never thought anything creepy would happen to me. I always loved reading real-life scary stories, and over time, I became really imaginative and a little paranoid. I thought it was just for fun and nothing serious. But a few years ago, when I was 19 years old, I was heading home after watching the New Year's Eve fireworks. It was 3 a.m. when I got back to my quiet, safe neighborhood. I live in Sydney, Australia, in a nice area where nothing bad usually happens. My friends wanted to call a taxi because it was so late, and we didn't want to wake up our parents to drive us home. But I was stubborn and insisted we walk instead, even though it was a really long walk. My friend Aiden complained the whole way, but I guess I can't blame him for complaining. Benjamin stayed quiet and just went along with it. I was in a good mood, even laughing a bit. When we got close to my street, we split up. The guys kept walking their much longer route home, and I went my own way. As I passed a small cake shop, I noticed a guy on the other side of the street. I only glanced at him for a second, but the way he quickly looked up at me like he was interested caught my attention. I continued walking quickly because I'm usually paranoid about things, and most of the time it's just my imagination. I turned onto my street, which was much darker than I expected. It was around 3:15 a.m. As I walked past the bowling club in the Oval, I glanced behind me a few times to check. It was cold and dark, and I started to feel nervous, but there was no one there. I was halfway down my street where the road goes downhill when I noticed something on the path ahead of me. I couldn't tell what it was, but at the last second, I stepped off the path and onto the road to avoid it. As I stepped onto the road, I turned a little and saw someone behind me. They weren't too close, but not too far away either. My heart started racing because I hadn't noticed them before. For them to get that close so quickly, it felt off. When I told people about it later, they said I should have been suspicious. I mean, it's 3 a.m., and you're quietly walking behind a girl without even keeping a safe distance. And if you were really innocent, you'd try to show that, right? I couldn't see who it was or tell if it was a man or a woman, because to me it just looked like a black shadow. I only saw them for a second. I was scared, so I quickly took out my phone and tried to call Aiden. I kept trying, but the Modaphone wouldn't let the call go through. I tried calling Benjamin, but he didn't pick up. I called him at least 5 times, feeling more and more nervous, but I didn't dare look behind me to see if the person was still there. By the time I reached my driveway, I thought I was safe and hurried up it. But halfway up, I quickly glanced over my shoulder and I saw the figure again. The next part is a bit hard to explain. It's all mixed up in my head. On one hand, it looked like he was just walking past my driveway, but on the other hand, I'm pretty sure it looked like he was about to step onto the driveway, like he was gonna walk up. At that moment, I thought maybe it was my brother Jonathan. I mean, who else would bother walking up my driveway, even if someone was following me? I never thought they would actually go as far as walking up my yard. I felt completely safe because my house was so close when he started following me. But something about the shape of this person didn't look like Jonathan, so I kept hurrying anyway. My mom stayed up to wait for me, and I'm so glad she did, because she opened the door as soon as I knocked. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if I had to wait outside. I went inside but left the second door open and the outside light on because I thought Jonathan might come in any minute now. But Mom said, "You can turn them off. Your brother came home 2 hours ago." I felt a bit scared for a moment, but I brushed it off because we always think we're completely safe. So I closed the door, turned off the light, and went to get a glass of water. Mom went to bed. I went to my room to grab my clothes and then headed to the bathroom for a shower. I also turned off the living room lights. Before I took a shower, I replied to a message from Aiden. He was asking if I got home safely. I asked him why he didn't answer his phone and told him I felt scared for a few minutes, but was okay now. While I was showering, I started thinking about that figure. I wasn't sure if it had been following me, but my mind kept going back and forth, wondering about it. Anyway, I remember thinking it was fine because I was safe now. But near the end of my shower, I heard a noise at the window. It wasn't the usual creaking or bumping noises you hear in an old house. The best way I could describe it was like someone pressing their hands against the window to steady themselves. It sounded really strange, and it caught my attention right away. I immediately thought there might be someone outside. I knew it had to be a strange sound to make me do what I did next. I turned off the water and crouched under the window, hiding and waiting. I stayed like that for a while, too scared to move. I waited for a few minutes, but nothing happened. Slow, I crawled out, still too scared to stand up straight, and turned off the bathroom lights. But it was too hard for me to dry off and get dressed in dark. So I turned on the heater light, which is smaller and not very bright. As I did, I noticed tiny blue lights at the window. Lights that definitely shouldn't be there. The best way to describe it is that it looked like the keypad of a phone glowing. I felt so scared, but I turned off the heater light and backed into the corner. Holding my towel tightly around me, I waited. It felt like a long time. Too scared to unlock the door or move because I knew it would make noise. As I sat there in the dark, more blue lights appeared outside the window. Several of them. They got really bright, and whoever it was seemed to be moving them. Trying to shine the light through the window, I unlocked the door and went into my parents' room, shaking like a leaf and trying to explain that someone was outside the bathroom window. I was really scared, so Mom quickly tried to find a safe room for me to change in. Meanwhile, Dad said he heard footsteps running back down the path. I'm so glad he did, because now the whole thing feels unreal, and I sometimes wonder if I imagined it all. But this proved it wasn't just my imagination. I was so shaky that I got into bed, but I couldn't sleep all night until the morning. Even then, I was still scared, especially when I heard Dad go outside into the backyard. I learned my lesson. I'll never walk home at night again. I even feel a bit nervous during the day now. Some people think it might have been the person I saw earlier, but I don't think so. Please don't walk home alone at night, girls. It only takes one moment to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and things can go very badly. On New Year's Eve 2016, something happened in Ixtapa, Mexico. My family and I go there every year for the holidays. Because we have an apartment there, it's a nice break for my dad from his work. Our apartment is part of a building complex with 24 apartments in total. They are split into 4 towers and they all look the same. We've had that apartment for a few years, and on New Year's Eve, one of the residents invited us and many of the other families to their apartment for a party to celebrate. About 35 people came to the party. The apartment was on the 4th floor, and we got there around 10 p.m. We planned to celebrate the rest of the night together. Around 10:50 or 11 p.m., one of my mom's friends looked up at the sky and said she saw something strange. At first, most of us, including me, didn't pay much attention and kept talking. But after a couple of minutes, more and more people started looking up. When we noticed the commotion, we got up and went out to the terrace to see what was going on. At first it seemed strange, but I would describe it as the stars twinkling. We could see stars, but these ones were much closer together than normal and twinkled in a weird, irregular way. As we kept watching, more and more stars appeared and started twinkling. Some people said they were just regular stars and that we were overreacting. But then the stars we thought were in the sky began moving toward the other twinkling stars. At this point, everyone started to get a little scared. I've always believed we might not be alone and that there are strange forces out there. But this was the first time I truly had no idea what was happening. There were too many to count. But we all agreed there were about 100 to 150 stars twinkling in one part of the sky. More kept moving across the sky to join them. When they stopped gathering, they kept twinkling in a strange way. It wasn't like the soft dimming of real stars. It was more like lights quickly turning on and off. Then the whole group moved across the sky and disappeared. We were all standing there with our mouths wide open. Many of us tried to take pictures or record it, but nothing showed up on our phone cameras because it was too far away, with about 35 people seeing it. And only an hour after we arrived, we knew we weren't imagining it. The most interesting part is that the apartment owner's son said he had talked to someone the year before who claimed to see something similar on New Year's Eve. He said he listened to the story, but didn't take it seriously, thinking it was just a random rant. My family and I still talk about what we saw. We tried to look up any events or natural phenomena that could explain it, but we found nothing.